All right. Well, welcome to Storytelling in the Terminator. Thank you so much for joining me today at Gen Con Online 2023. As I just mentioned a little bit before, everyone as they enter is muted. Please feel free to ask questions in chat. I will try to get to them after I get done with the content of the presentation. Hopefully we'll have time for a lot of questions. So today's topic is storytelling in the Terminator, and this is the 1984 Terminator movie. And just to get started here, my name is Matt. I run DiceGeeks.com. I am a writer, game designer. I create tabletop resources. I have been running games since I was 9 years old, started way back. I am also a novelist, and along with being a game master and a dungeon master, as well as a writer, I am always interested in storytelling, how I can be a better storyteller. And I wanted to take time here to look at kind of some of the storytelling techniques that we find in the Terminator film. So enough of all that. Let's go ahead and dive in. Okay. So here, before we begin, I think it is pretty important to mention a few things about the Terminator. So in 1957, Harlan Ellison wrote a short story, or it was published in 1957. Sorry, I don't know when he wrote it, but it was published in 1957. It was called Soldier from Tomorrow. Then Ellison adapted that into an Outer Limits episode in 64. He actually wrote the adaptation for that himself. And why is that important when we talk about the Terminator? Well, after the Terminator kind of became a big hit in the 80s, during an interview, James Cameron said that he was reading a lot of Harlan Ellison at the time that he started writing and making the Terminator. Well, Harlan Ellison sued, and now at the end of the original Terminator, after Sarah drives her Jeep towards the storm over the mountains and we fade to black, we get a slate that says acknowledgement to the works of Harlan Ellison, because Harlan Ellison sued James Cameron for an unacknowledged influence over his work. Now, in 1966, right, there was a movie called Cyborg 2087. I don't think it acknowledged Harlan Ellison at all, but it is very similar to the Outer Limits episode and to the short story of Harlan Ellison. But also, what is very interesting about Cyborg 2087 is not only is it the Terminator, it's almost pretty specifically Terminator 2. They come back in time to stop the machine uprising, which is quite interesting. The movie is free on YouTube, but if you want to skip the movie, you can just watch a recap done by a YouTube channel called Dark Corners. If you love movies and you have never seen Dark Corners, check that out. I am not affiliated whatsoever. It is just a shout out to a great YouTube channel that needs more subscribers. The host of that show does a breakdown of Cyborg 2087, talking about the Terminator. It's only about 8 or 9 minutes long, and it is not only entertaining, but it is very enlightening as well. So I thought I would mention some of these kind of influences here, perhaps, on the Terminator real quick before we jumped into some of the storytelling aspects here of the Terminator. But that's what we're going to do now. All right. So here we go. So we are talking about the Terminator 1984. directed by James Cameron, written by James Cameron and Gail Ann Hurd, with additional dialogue by William Wisher Jr., of course, very famously, right, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Behan, Linda Hamilton, the amazing Paul Winfield, and Lance Hendrickson, Earl Bowen, Dick Miller, Bill Paxton, and Brian Thompson. Bill Paxton and Brian Thompson are a couple of the punks at the beginning. Once you know one of the punks is Bill Paxton, you will never unsee him as one of the punks. In the beginning, where the Terminator gets his clothes. So this is just a little background here, so to make sure we're talking about the right movie. And I'm going to be mentioning a lot of names and things like that. So I hope that people know the movie pretty well. I will try to explain some things as I go along here, and as we dive in a bit, to really set the stage. So hopefully I can do a good job of describing a visual medium here on Zoom. So, like I said, I wanted to look at some of the storytelling techniques. And of course, we're always thinking, how can we use these, right? How can we use some of these techniques? And it's not that we're, not that we're going to remake the Terminator or something like that, although apparently a lot of people have remade some of these same themes and stuff over and over again. But these are, I wanted to look at some universal storytelling techniques that we can use, whether we're writing a novel, whether we're making a film, whether we're creating a campaign for D&D or for Traveler or whatever RPG we're doing, or if we're just telling a story, right? These are some techniques that I think we can use to help make us better storytellers, help improve whatever our craft is. If we're a writer, if we're a game designer, if we're a DM, if we're a GM, whatever it is. And so I think we can use some of these, and they tend to be universal. So let's take a look here at the first one. Okay, so here we have Sarah Connor, right? And this first one that I wanted to look at and to consider is exposition through an audience surrogate. And what this kind of means here is, of course, we know exposition is when we need to, it's when we need to get out all of the stuff about our world, right? We're world building. We need to tell everybody. So in the Terminator, right, the exposition is who the Terminator is, what is Skynet, what is going on, who is John Connor. We need all of this world set. Like, when did the nuclear war happen? All this stuff. We need all this stuff, all this exposition kind of into the story so we understand what is happening in the story. But we don't want to just drop it in a way that's boring or dull. Or one of the sins, right, that we'll see in movies or in books, or sometimes in role-playing games, as we are going along, is where somebody says something like, well, as you know, we've been working on this project for 10 years. Well, if they know it, why are you saying it like that, right? So here, what is done in the Terminator, what makes this exposition so interesting is that Sarah knows none of this stuff, right? This all happens in the future. Of course, Sarah wouldn't know that she's going to have a son in the future, that there's going to be a nuclear war in the future, that the machines are going to rise or whatever. Of course, she doesn't know any of that, right? She doesn't know any of that because she's in the past. That's all future stuff. So since she doesn't know it, it makes perfect sense that somebody has to tell her about it, right? And so while usually Reese is telling her some of these things, or he's telling the police some of them, interrogation, right? Because the police don't know either, right? They don't know what's happening when he's being interrogated in the in questioning room or whatever it is. He's telling, these things. We're learning as the audience, he's telling people who don't know these things. Okay. And this is one of, like I said, if you find yourself writing things that say there's 3 people in your scene, they all know the things, but they have to start saying, well, as you know, oh, do you remember? Oh, this. Once you start saying little phrases like that, you're in the danger of just dropping exposition. As a writer or a storyteller that you need to get that exposition out, but your characters would already know that. So you're just going to add some kind of, device in there just to make sure, like, oh no, they're emphasizing it. They're making sure, the one scientist understands. And you're like, no, they're not. You're just trying to get out exposition. Everybody in your scene knows it all. They wouldn't be talking about it. It's going to be dull. But when we're talking to Sarah here, she doesn't know. When Reese is talking to her, she doesn't know about cyborgs. So he has to explain what the cyborgs are. The police officer, when the psychologist or whatever it is asking Reese questions, he doesn't know. He doesn't know any of this stuff. So he has to explain time travel to the criminal psychologist, right? And so that helps us, right? Since we don't know, we're going to learn it at the same time as those other characters. So it makes sense, in that way. So that is a good way to get some exposition out to your reader, to your listener, to your audience, whatever it is. The next one here, this kind of goes along with it. And of course, I've heard even James Cameron in some special features and interviews talk about how this was one of his primary goals, since he had a lot of exposition in the Terminator. You got to explain a lot of stuff here, that he was going to have exposition being given during an action sequence, right? So that it's not dull and boring, or people, Reese and Sarah walking along a tree-lined sidewalk, at dawn, and Reese is telling her all about the cyborgs. No, they're in a car chase, right? They're in a car chase, careening down the streets, evading police officers, evading the Terminator. So he's giving us exposition all along the way during this action sequence. So we are definitely not bored. We are not, the whole movie doesn't stop just so we can learn about the cyborgs, or so we can learn about Skynet and the nuclear war. The movie keeps going. There's this action scene, but we're still getting exposition. We're still getting set up. And of course, Cameron here handles it very well by giving us kind of crazy action, car chase, where Reese is telling her who he is, and that she's been targeted for termination. There's the car is going all over the place. He is careening, all across the, careening all around the streets, up on the sidewalk and everything. And but then, right, we do get kind of a quiet moment, right? Because Cameron here, he's bringing us up to highs, and then he's bringing us down to kind of quiet moments. And so we get that kind of crazy, frenetic action sequence. And then when Reese is like, hey, I need to ditch this car, right? We're going to kind of go into a quiet sequence where he's reloading the shotgun, right? We're also seeing what? We're going to have more violence here in a bit, right? We're going to have more shooting here in a little bit. And it's kind of a quiet moment where he's, explaining some of this stuff to Sarah. But we're also getting what? We're getting cutaways to the Terminator looking for them, for police cars driving through the parking garage. So that's all keeping some tension there. So we're not bored. This is not an exposition dump where we're just getting it all like thrown at us in a boring manner or something like this. We're getting this exposition during action, during important scenes, where where we are engaged with it and we are learning. And it is also interesting to see, say, some of, say some of Cameron's more recent work, um, like The Way of Water, where he doesn't do this anymore. Actually, he doesn't do the first one anymore either. He has people say, "Oh, as you know," and then he explains stuff to, and then, Way of Water, I think it was 18 minutes or 22 minutes at the beginning of the film where we're just told what's going on. Um, in, you know, and nothing's happening. We're just told, we're just brought back up to speed. And so I thought that was interesting that Cameron, knew to do it back, you know, how many years ago? Almost 40 years ago. He knew to do that back then, but he's kind of gotten away from it. And I don't know why. I don't know why, because this was absolutely, an incredible sequence of how we're learning all about the Terminators. We're learning about time travel. We're learning about John Connor, you know, all of this stuff during action scenes, you know, during scenes of high tension, and it's all being explained to somebody who logically wouldn't know any of this is happening. And I think that is just great storytelling, right? That is just absolutely great storytelling. All right, some other pieces here real quick, before we dive into something that I want to spend a little bit more time on. So here are just a few things that happen, right? So we do get some exposition at the beginning, right? We get a little card, right? And we see, uh, Los Angeles, what is it, 2029, and it's all blown away and everything like that. So we do get that kind of standard, text kind of exposition, kind of to set the stage a little bit. But after that is over, so this first bullet point here, right? After the short little prologue, we see a machine. It's the trash truck loader, right? It's in kind of a close-up of the loader of this trash truck, and it kind of comes down. Well, after that kind of comes down, and it's, we see the electrical effect of the Terminator showing up, and the driver can't, turn on the car, and he runs away, right? We're at the trash truck, so we see a machine. Well, then we kind of pan over and we see the Terminator, right? So that creates a visual right there that it's a machine, and then he connects the visual of a trash truck machine to the Terminator right off the beginning here, looking at a machine, right? Saying, look, here's a machine. Now you're looking at a machine, the trash truck. Now you're looking at a machine, the Terminator, even though he looks like a man. And I think that is a great kind of parallel right there. That's a great example of a parallel. Then we get the opposite for Reese. So the second bullet point, before Reese arrives, we see a displaced man, a homeless man, and then we see Reese, right, who is what is Reese? He is a displaced man. He is displaced in time, right? So we see a homeless man, a displaced man. Then we see Reese, who is displaced in time, but he's a man, right? And so we get these two connections and these two parallels, right? We see a machine, see a Terminator. We see a man who is displaced, who doesn't have a home, who's displaced, and we see a man who is displaced in time. Some great parallels right there. And I think those are some simple things that we can do as well in our storytelling, just to remember that we can create little parallels like that. Maybe the audience won't even see stuff like that, but it actually adds a lot of depth to what we're doing. So we can do that in novels, we can do it in film, and we can do that in our role-playing games as well. The next one, right? Reese looks up Sarah in the phone book, and then we cut to Sarah's intro, right? So we already know Sarah's name. It wasn't spoken. We don't know Sarah. We've never seen her before, but Reese looks up Sarah Connor, right? And he goes down, passes the first two. There's three in the phone book. He passes the first two. stops at the third one, kind of underlines it a little bit with his finger. And what do we get? We see Sarah Connor. We get just a cut to Sarah riding her little scooter, and we know automatically that's Sarah Connor, right? Even though nobody has spoken her name, we have no idea why she's important to this story just yet or anything like that. But there she is. So that was a really good way, like a visual setup to introduce a character that way. So that's just something else that we can think about as well when we're thinking about how do we set things up? How do we introduce characters? Well, we could actually introduce them in a visual way or a different way even before we take over their point of view. All right, the next little piece here, right? The Terminator runs over a toy truck, right? Right before the first murder of a Sarah Connor in the phone book, the Terminator pulls into this, this nice suburban neighborhood where kids are playing on the street, and the station wagon he has stolen, right? He just crushes this toy truck under the wheel. And I always thought that was a strange, shot. And it's like, wow, this is just a little detail that he puts in here, and I was just like, oh, well, it's probably just to add visual interest or something. Well, and then I realized, of course, what happens at the end of the movie, right? Near the end of the movie, the Terminator is run over by a truck, right? So we get kind of this reversal here, right? We get this reversal here of what's going to happen, in just, later in the movie. And it was a great setup, and it's absolutely seeing a bit of foreshadowing here. And so I always thought that was, like I said, for a long time. Of course, I saw the movie for the first time when I was like 14 on VHS or whatever. I didn't know why he ran it over. I didn't know why he ran the truck over. It was just a weird detail, but it was actually setting up later that the Terminator is going to be run over by a truck. And I mean, it's just a nice little detail. All right, so I wanted to dive into here. We still have plenty of time, but I do want to dive into a sequence here a little deeper. And then hopefully we'll still have time for some questions, and that. I didn't know what exactly to call this, but I was calling it setups and payoffs, because some of the things that I'm going to talk about in a sequence here aren't exactly foreshadowing, right? But they are setting up something so that it seems logical. It makes things seem like they're happening for a reason instead of having things disconnected or out of place. So I was calling it setups and payoffs. There's probably a better term for that, and somebody who's more clever can come up with something better than that. But I do want to look at a sequence, so I'm going to try to set up the sequence a little bit here, and hopefully you are familiar with the film, but I will try to explain it the best I can. So the sequence that I want to talk about is kind of when we first see Sarah's apartment. So we get Sarah's her intro to her apartment. We see her roommate Ginger for the first time, and then it kind of stretches all the way to when the Terminator attacks the apartment and murders Ginger and her boyfriend. And why the sequence always stands out to me is there's a lot going on in the sequence, right? There's a lot happening here. One thing Cameron does really well, say in the Terminator and Aliens, especially, is there are things happening like all the time. And so I just want to kind of break this down, make sure we know some of the characters. So we have Sarah, mother of the future. We have Ginger, who's Sarah's roommate. We have Matt, who is Ginger's boyfriend. We have the Terminator, who is the Terminator. We have Pugsley, who is Sarah's pet iguana. Oh, sorry, I misspelled Sarah there. Reese, the father of the future, and then we have the police, right? We have Traxler and the other one, Volkovich. I don't know if they even say his name. In the movie, the police detective played by Paul Winfield, and then Lance Hendrickson. They come on into it only a little bit, as intercutting and things like that. But so these are the main characters. So I'm going to be saying a lot of names. I'm going to be saying Sarah, Ginger, Matt, Terminator, Pugsley, Reese, and all that. So just to kind of set up the sequence here. And I'm also going to kind of just read a summary here. I put together a quick summary of the sequence to kind of remind ourselves if we haven't seen, if we haven't seen this sequence in a while, or we haven't watched the film in a while. So we cut to Sarah's apartment. Sarah's roommate, Ginger, is introduced. They're both getting ready for dates. However, Sarah learns that her date has canceled, so she comforts herself by cuddling with Pugsley, which Ginger thinks is disgusting. Ginger and her boyfriend, Matt, decide to stay in for the night while Sarah goes out for pizza and a movie, I should add. The Terminator attacks Matt and Ginger, most likely thinking Ginger is Sarah. Unknowingly, Sarah gives away her location by calling to the apartment, and the answering machine goes off, and unwittingly gives away her whereabouts at Tech Noir, right? The nightclub, so the Terminator knows he hasn't gotten his target yet. So that's kind of the setup. I hope everybody remembers this a little bit. This is the kind of the very basic summary. But then here we're going to dive in, and we're going to look at some different pieces here of what I was calling setups and payoffs. We're going to look at a number of different things that are happening in this sequence. So, and like I said, it's a fairly complex sequence. There is a lot of things that are happening here, but there are a number of things that we get set up kind of to expect, but we don't know we're being set up, but they make sense. And then we get the payoff towards the end. And I know this is a busy slide. I'm going to talk through it here. I do apologize. I'm having to drink a lot of water today. I'm dry for some reason. So the first one here is Ginger's headphones. Okay. Ginger, when we first see Ginger, right, she is loading a cassette tape into her, her Walkman, and she is putting on headphones, even while she's doing what? Getting ready for a date, right? Even while she's getting ready for a date. And then Sarah and her get the cords of the headphones and like Sarah's hair dryer and stuff like tangled, because they're both standing there getting ready for dates, and they get them tangled together, and it pulls off Ginger's headphones. Well, this is just drawing our attention, right, to the fact that Ginger listens to music through headphones a lot, right? But it's giving us kind of an interesting, setup, right? It's giving us a visual setup for this while drawing attention to it without looking kind of silly or something. It's setting us up. It's drawing attention to it. And in a funny kind of way, kind of starts to make Ginger and Sarah look, kind of endearing, like they're roommates, they're like sisters, right? They have a very, close relationship. And we start seeing that. But we also see, right, that, we're drawing attention to the headphones, to the headphones, to the headphones. And then while, after the sequence progresses a bit and Sarah has, gone out, and Ginger and Matt are, not to be graphic, let's just say enjoying each other's company, right? The police keep calling Sarah and Ginger's apartment, and the answering machine keeps going off. Well, Matt just turns up Ginger's headphones so she can't hear the answering machine, right? So she can't hear it. And That is just another setup, right? Is just drawing attention to her headphones, to her headphones, to her headphones. Well, what does this lead to, right? What does this lead to? Well, when Ginger leaves her bedroom for a kind of a midnight snack, and leaves Matt, kind of dozing in the bedroom, she has her headphones on. So we don't think this is silly. We don't think this is weird. This is set up for her character multiple times. We are expecting Ginger to listen to headphones. And because of the intercutting and the Terminator and the shootings and the murders, and things like that have already, happened before this, as an audience, what are we are sitting there thinking to ourselves, like, Ginger, take off your headphones, take off your headphones, take off your headphones. And what happens, right? Well, exactly what you would think happens, right? The Terminator comes in, attacks Matt. Ginger does not hear that because she has her headphones on. And so we get the reveal of when the Terminator throws Matt through the bedroom door, and Ginger screams, and we get that big kind of, shock scene, right? But that was all set up multiple times with Ginger in the headphones, because what would have happened, say, like, Ginger just walks out of the bedroom and then for the first time puts on headphones. What would the audience have said then? The audience would have said, oh, you just don't want her to hear the Terminator when he comes, right? That's silly. But now, since we've set it up, we used it in kind of, some ways to make the character kind of endearing, right? With her and Sarah getting the cords tangled and stuff like this. We don't even think twice about it. We just think it's her character, and we think, that this is just normal for her, right? So, oh no, she's not going to hear the Terminator. And that just ups our tension right there. And that is just a way to make something seem very logical as we're doing it, because, to make the scene more impactful, right? The screenwriters, Cameron, Galen Hurd, would have said, well, to make it impactful, it would be better if there was a fight scene going on in the other room and Ginger doesn't hear it. Well, let's set up that she listens to headphones. Perfect, right? We get multiple setups all the way. So that is great. Here's just even a little one, right? Ginger, the second one here, Ginger doesn't like Pugsley. So Pugsley is Sarah's iguana. So now Sarah having a pet iguana actually does a couple things here too, right? Giving your main character kind of an odd pet makes Sarah what? It makes Sarah a little quirky, right? It makes her a little quirky. We start to connect with Sarah a little bit more, right? She has a pet iguana. Like, I don't think many people have pet iguanas, so it makes her a little, it makes her a little quirky. It makes her, a little strange. And that's cool, because we start liking her more and more, right? Just by the fact that she has a pet. Well, but we also get a setup here, right? Ginger doesn't like the iguana. Probably a lot of people wouldn't. So she doesn't like Sarah kissing the iguana or whatever, so she thinks that's disgusting. So Ginger doesn't like Pugsley. So what happens later, right? When Ginger leaves the bedroom, goes out for her midnight snack, we're already being set up that the Terminator is probably going to come to the apartment. And what do we get? We get a jump scare with Pugsley, right? Pugsley, which was set up beforehand, because Pugsley gets out of his cage all the time, right? He gets out of his aquarium all the time. So that was set up that he escapes from his aquarium. Then we get a jump scare. So we get a jump scare with Pugsley running up along the top of the cabinets, knocking down some, I don't know, boxes of crackers or whatever it is, right into Ginger space. And we get a jump scare because we're expecting the Terminator to jump out now at any moment, right? We are expecting the Terminator just to lunge into the room and to kill everybody, because that's what's happening. And so we get this jump scare with Pugsley. So not only was set up that Ginger doesn't like Pugsley, it was also set up that Pugsley escapes from his cage. So it makes perfect sense that she is scared by Pugsley and that Pugsley could be crawling up on the cabinets. So those are a couple setups. And like I said, it also, giving Sarah an unusual pet, also goes right into building her character as kind of quirky and likable. Another one right here, the third one here, Sarah's canceled date, right? So what this sets up, right? She hears that her date is canceled through a message on the answering machine. We're also getting set up for the answering machine here coming in a bit. Sarah's canceled date, right, allows for Sarah to be what? It allows for her to be wandering the town on like a Friday or Saturday night, or Saturday night, I think it is, right? It allows her to be out there wandering. And so what do we see instantly, right? We see as soon as she leaves the apartment, Reese follows her, right? Reese starts to follow her. So, and at this point, we're not sure who Reese is, right? We know he hasn't been committing some of the murders, but we don't know who he is, right? And so why is he following Sarah? So that canceled date, right? Not only, does it propel Sarah, into town to where, she can wander alone, it also means she's not at the apartment, right? If she's at the apartment and her and Ginger and Matt are playing, a board game or something, the Terminator is just going to come there and get them all. So she needs to be out of that apartment where she's technically vulnerable out, kind of, walking around. Somebody can follow her out there, but it also gets her away from the apartment to set up kind of the mistaken identity, right? Because Terminator probably thinks Ginger is Sarah, right? He's just looking for a female, doesn't know what Sarah looks like. So the canceled date sets that up. The canceled date also sets up something that happens towards the end, right? She's unlucky in love, right? Sarah can't, figure out dating and, scene in 1984 or whatever. And she's unlucky in love, right? So that kind of sets that all up too, that why she doesn't have a steady boyfriend or anything like that. So that sets all of that up just with a canceled date on an answering machine, right? So you can kind of start thinking about, how do we do this in, our stories, movies, novels, campaigns, things like that. The answering machine. Okay, so this answering machine, right, is something common that happens throughout this movie, that Sarah and Ginger's answering machine. We get this answering machine quite a bit. And of course, what is the setup here? Well, there's a number of them, right? Sarah's mom is introduced on the answering machine, kind of just in the background. You can barely even hear her. She's just, so Sarah's mom's checking up on Sarah. We barely hear it, but it's there. We get Sarah's canceled date, all of this stuff. But what, also, right, Sarah gives herself aware, she gives her location away because she calls Ginger and she says, Ginger, I need you and Matt to come pick me up. I'm at this bar, Tech Noir, on the answering machine. That's what she says. She gives herself away to the Terminator, right? Because he's listening he happens to be there, murdering Ginger at the time. But also, it even keeps going, right? It even keeps going. When you thought that there couldn't be more layers in a 1980s action movie, there's even more, right? The intro message to their answering machine is Ginger saying, hello, ha ha ha, I fooled you, you're talking to a machine. And then she says, you've reached Ginger and Sarah, and, leave a message or whatever. But she says, right? Hello, haha, fooled you. You're talking to a machine, right? So we've already picked up that there are some themes with machines throughout the movie, okay? So now the answering machine, right? Obviously, it's another machine that people talk to, right? Not only does this set up right here, right? This answering machine gives Sarah away, right? It gives her away to a machine. So Sarah is leaving a message for Ginger, but she's actually telling the message to the Terminator. But this one actually also goes into foreshadowing here, right? It goes into straight up foreshadowing, because later in the movie, what does Sarah do again? Sarah gives away her location because she is talking to her mother, or she thinks she's talking to her mother. She is actually talking to the Terminator, who is imitating her mother's voice, right? And so what do we see again? We see, ha ha ha, fooled you. You're talking to a machine. So even that answering machine, which seems like maybe at first kind of this inconsequential thing and just a device to get, to cause miscommunication, is actually worked into the theme of the movie, right? You're talking to a machine. Fooled you. You gave away your location. The first time you gave it away again because you're talking to a machine. Very, very, very layered there, right? And it was an opportunity that could have been very easily missed, right, by the screenwriters here, Cameron and Hurd. They could have missed that, but they didn't, right? They got it, right? We're going to use an answering machine as a device to cause kind of miscommunication and stuff. Okay, that's kind of just a device that we need to use. Oh wait, we can actually work it into the theme of our story. Also, just a couple here, really quick. I do want to leave some time for questions, so I'll speed through the last few here. Ginger's boyfriend Matt is introduced. That she, Ginger has a pretty serious boyfriend. He's introduced as Matt. It's introduced also when he calls the apartment the first time, and Sarah answers the phone, that Sarah and him have a friendly relationship, right? They have a very friendly relationship between him, and her, and all of that. So what do we get, right? We're expecting the Terminator to attack the apartment at any moment. Sarah learns her date's canceled, so she's leaving. She opens the door, walks out, and we get a jump scare because Matt grabs Sarah around the waist. And this was all set up. That Sarah and Matt have a good relationship, that they have, they're good friends. They have, a good relationship between each other. And this was set up so Matt is just doing something that is playful that you would do to some friends or something. She walks out and he scares her. And we get a jump scare. So we get another jump scare, right? Where, Cameron is setting us up for, the big moment, right? When the Terminator comes in and starts terminating, also just a minor one that I think is, that is just kind of interesting. The actor who played Matt is jacked, right? He is a big guy. He's very muscular, but when he fights the Terminator, there isn't even a contest, right? All we basically get is Matt tries to take a swing with a lamp or whatever at the Terminator, and it doesn't matter, right? What we get is Matt just being thrown around the room. And what that sets up is just how powerful the Terminator is, right? And it's a visual setup, right? Nobody has to say, well, that Terminator, he's huge or he's big or he's strong or something like that. We don't have to set that up. We see that Matt is, a big guy, really in shape, and the Terminator tosses him around the room like, he's a toy or something like that. So that's a setup as well, going into the fact, creating in the audience, right, without any words, creating in the audience just this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like how in the world is Sarah going to get away from this Terminator, right? Because now I'm invested, right? I want Sarah to be okay, right? Even though I still don't yet know what is going on. I don't know why the Terminator's still here yet, right? We haven't got the exposition yet. Reese hasn't rescued Sarah yet from the nightclub. We don't know, but we know that we like Sarah and we don't want this Terminator to get a hold of her because, oh my gosh, he just did this to this guy who's huge and jacked. and how is she going to get away, right? And this is just all setting it up in the audience without words. It's absolutely awesome. All right, so I'm going to wrap up here and give some time for questions, but this, this is just something that we can think about. How do we use these techniques? Like I said, I don't know what we're doing. I mean, most everybody here, obviously we're at Gen Con for some reason, or we're interested in tabletop role-playing games. So we're either game designers, we're either writers, we're either role players, we're either dungeon masters and game masters. Possibly we're filmmakers, who knows, right? We have some kind of creative bent to us. That's why I think we're here and we're interested in storytelling. So how can we use some of these techniques? How can we make sure we're not giving, and I think the place to start is just by asking ourselves questions, right? Am I just giving an exposition dump, right? Am I just dumping exposition, or am I making it interesting by having the person who is learning about it not know what's going on? Am I making the exposition interesting by having it happen during exciting sequences, or while people are in danger and they have to learn some of this stuff, at this moment, right? Or they're going to be even in more danger, right, during an action sequence. How can I set up some parallels? If my theme is killer machines or machines run amok, right? I need to probably show machines a lot. I need to show some parallels between machines, or show some parallels between people and that. How can I connect some of these things, right? How can I add little details in? How can I add a bit of foreshadowing? Terminator runs over a truck. Truck's going to run over the Terminator. Just a little detail. How can I add some of those little details into my RPG campaign, into my novel, into my movie, into my short story? How, what can I do to kind of create some of that? How can I do that? The setups and payoff kind of portion, like I said, I didn't know exactly what to call that, because a lot of times they're just making things make sense later on. You're giving a reason for something to happen, so it works for the story very well, right? So, the jump scare with Pugsley. Ginger doesn't like Pugsley. Pugsley escapes his aquarium all the time. So it's perfectly normal that he would scare Ginger and that he would be out on the top of the cabinets. That's set up. The headphones, right? Multiple scenes, setups of headphones. So it's not strange that Ginger, when she's, if she listens to headphones while people are all around her, she's going to listen to headphones while she's alone, of course, right? So she's not going to hear the Terminator. But that would have been silly without the setup, right? Without the setup, it would have seemed silly. Oh, she just put those on because you needed her not to hear. With the setup, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. So we can just ask ourselves these questions kind of just over and over again as we're writing a story, as we're making, a film, as we're, creating an RPG campaign, or while we're running a session. It's like, how do I set up something so it makes sense later? And I think those are important ways that we can do that. We are coming down. We have about 12 minutes or so left. If anybody has any questions, like I said, I do have you all on mute. It just keeps things kind of less chaotic. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type those questions into chat. I will answer questions. We have about 11 minutes, so we have plenty of time. I also, would like some feedback. If you think I'm crazy on some of this stuff, if you think I'm off base, hey, let me know. Okay, any questions? Sometimes I think you can possibly read too much into, movies and stuff. Am I so if I'm reading too much, let me know. All right. So okay, so now we got some Okay, so somebody in chat says, no, I have no questions. Do need to go and watch the movie again with fresh eyes now. Absolutely. If I can cause you to go watch this movie again with fresh eyes, I would love it. Okay, so Doug asks, do you have any concrete examples of how you have used these techniques in your own adventures or stories? Oh man, that's a good question. I certainly have tried to do some of these things, right? Um, I've only written and published one novel so far, so I really did try to focus on um, when I needed to give some exposition. I am always very conscious that I do not have two characters say, well, as you know, or something like that. So in my novel, I definitely tried to set up that if somebody was going to give some exposition, that they didn't know about it, right? That that person didn't know about that thing. You know, one of the people in the scenes didn't know what that meant, and they could learn from that. Um, you know, exposition during action sequences is um, is another interesting one that I have tried to do that um, in a number of RPG campaigns kind of over the years, ever since I kind of learned about this technique. Um, and I have tried that with varying varying degrees of success, right? Like, so why are the goblins attacking the village? Right, you're in the middle of the fight of the scene, you know, while goblins are attacking, then you can start learning about why the goblins are attacking, right? You can, you know, I've tried to do things like that in the past, where it's like, okay, while the attack's happening, um, oh, why are the goblins focusing on this one building in town? Oh, well, maybe they want an object, maybe they want to kidnap a certain person or something like that. So I've definitely tried to do some things like that. Um, so we can, you know, kind of set that up. Some of the foreshadowing and stuff in RPGs, I know a lot of times foreshadowing can be difficult because a lot of times we don't know where our players are going to go, and I'm going to talk about that in a session later today. We don't know where our players are going to go, but in my novel, I definitely tried to set up a few things where you can kind of you know, where you sow a bit of a seed, where you show somebody is um you know, maybe you plant a seed of dissension in somebody where they question somebody, you know, question somebody talking to them, or questioning, you know, something they are telling them, and then later, you know, down the line in the work, you see that person like working against the other person, and then by them, you know, by introducing a little bit of dissension at one point that might be innocuous, might be innocent, might be just a difference of opinion, you can kind of show that actually no, it goes deeper than that. And that was kind of, you know, I've tried to do that some. um uh I also kind of back in a past lifetime was a filmmaker, because I was inspired by movies like this. So I tried to make movies. So I tried to do that in some of my movies. Uh, there, you know, again, varying degrees of success on that. But one thing about this, right? One thing about these techniques is, and I will kind of, you know, let people know about this. One thing about some of these techniques is they're not necessarily easy to do, right? Um, you know, here, you know, somebody just in chat says, shows what a great filmmaker writer Cameron is. Yes, yes, it does. Um, because some of these are not easy to do, right? You know, maybe kind of showing machines over and over again, like we get machines shown over and over again kind of through the movie. um you know, Reese sees earth moving machines, and it gives him a, you know, it transitions into a flashback of him fighting machines. So that one might be an easy one. So if you're running a campaign or you're writing a story or something that involves, you know, AI or computers or something, show computers at different stages, right? try to build parallels between those. You know, and it doesn't all have to be machines and stuff. That's just the example I'm coming up with here because of the Terminator, but it could be something else, right? Um, you know, if you have a theme of, I don't know, it'll probably be dumb if I think of it offhand, but like, you know, if you have some other type of theme, you know, about how you know, I don't know, how social media is bad for people. Well, show us people interacting with social media, even in innocuous ways, right? Show us something kind of along the ways. Draw some parallels that are not overt, right? That are not, you know, too overt, so we can kind of get those in our mind, get those, you know, even, you know, kind of not on a, you know, not on a very obvious level, but a kind of underneath tone throughout, you know, your story or throughout your campaign or something like that. You know, if you're running a sci-fi campaign and you're going to do something with, you know, AI or something like that, well, introduce it in, you know, you know, show how people are becoming more mechanized, right? Show how, you know, we're going to have something with cyborgs later. Well, show how people are more and more, you know, mechanical. Show people who have an exoskeleton and they're walking along. Show, you know, some things like that that kind of reinforce your idea. If your theme is humans are becoming more machine like, you know, show us some of those things, right? To build on the theme that's gonna, you know, that's gonna kind of emerge later and then become kind of obvious to people. Show us that in the beginning, you know, as we kind of move along, right? I hope that makes sense. I hope that answered the question. We still have a few minutes, about 5 minutes or 4 minutes here. I hope that answered. I should think of some more concrete examples in my own writing and stuff, but I know once I learned about these techniques, I definitely started trying to do that. Um, some of the ones too, also with like Pugsley, somebody not liking Pugsley and Pugsley escaping all the time. That one is a, you know, a pretty easy one to implement if you have somebody who is mischievous or a pet that escapes all the time. That one is uh, you know, really you know, that one's really interesting, right? Because you can do that pretty easily with a you know, with something that, like, you know, somebody's pet, you know, monkey or something escapes all the time, and well, they've stolen the keys now to something, you know, to the chest, and it's off running through the city and you have to go chase them. Well, you can set that one up pretty easy, you know. Oh, well, thank you. Some people are saying they enjoyed the seminars. Thank you so much. And rewatching movies is on the agenda. Absolutely. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys coming. We do have a couple more minutes. If anybody wants to sneak in a last question or anything like that, I really do appreciate everybody's time. And I try to put a lot into these seminars to give a lot out to people. I will be, you know, this is recorded, so I will be posting it later on my YouTube channel, and I'll drop the link in the messaging on Gen Con Online at the seminar post if you want to catch that. Any last quick questions real fast before I shut down? All right. Well, somebody else says, thank you. Very enjoyable. Well, I am glad. I am glad. Like I said, I put a lot of work into these. I take these seriously. I take your time seriously. So I also take storytelling very seriously. If you didn't catch that already. All right. So a lot of thanks. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, a few more tools in the DM toolbox. Absolutely. Just a few more tools. How do I use foreshadowing? How do I reinforce a theme? How do I set up things so they make sense for my players? How do I give out exposition so I'm not just talking for 3 hours about the Gods War, you know, while all my players sit around the table and don't do anything? Like, how do I engage them into the story to make sure that they understand that this is, you know, important and they should be learning it and they are doing something while they are doing it? So those are definitely all things to think about. And we are spinning right down to the end of time right here. So Well, that was a little ironic. I said the end of time, the end of our time, not the end of the world like in Terminator. But thank you so much for listening and joining today. And like I said, be available later on YouTube. And I have more seminars today. So thank you so much for joining today. I'll see you all later. Bye. Oh, no. Oh. Yeah, it just all froze up. I don't know if I. Well, you know, the mic still may be on. I closed the camera thing, but the mic still may be on. I don't know what is going on here. I don't want to, yeah. Okay, I closed the camera screen. But you might be able to hear people. I don't know.